My name is Barbara Fischer. I work for the German National Library, but today I'm not going to talk on authority control or on data and things like that. Now I'm going to talk on the whole topic of our conference, which is climate, culture and crisis. And I'm going to focus on climate crisis and what GLAM institutions do in order to meet that climate emergency. Please follow me. I'm trying to build up with you a collection of climate crisis action by galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And I've categorized them into 5 categories and giving you some best practices along this little presentation. In the category number 1, there's of course yourself. What are you doing? How are you moving yourself? Of course, you can change your daily routines. You should support your local planet. And please become a climate activist in your own institution. That's very important. But I'm not going to focus in this talk so much on what you as an individual could do. I believe there are enough information around already. Take an example of these youngsters jumping here on a manifestation in Munich saying, ho, 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 who's not for carbon is not jumping. But we're going to focus in this talk on what institutions do in order to meet climate emergency, in order to meet climate crisis. What do they do in different scales? So the category 2 is going to be informing. This could be an exhibition on climate change or climate crisis. It could be art interventions on climate change, or it could be simply highlighting publications that focus on the topic. So let's see what different institutions are coming up with. There's the exhibition Emedan Ison Smelter that was a public exhibition, or still is, at Nordiska Museet in Stockholm. It's running this year, and I think it's going to be prolonged for next year. They are focusing on what happens to the Arctic when it is melting away due to climate crisis. What happens to the animals, what happens to the flora, and what happens to all the people that actually live there. So this is giving you some more ideas for a general audience on what happens, what are the effects of climate change. And I linked more information on that exhibition in the slides you will find later on. In Spain, for instance, the Prado, on occasion of the Global Climate Conference held last year in Madrid, started an awareness campaign on climate crisis. When you actually go to the link, you can see they choose, I think it was like 17 images from the very famous Prado collection and combined them with other artworks showing what will happen if there is a rise in climate. Then, of course, museums, especially those on nature history, are offering a broad field of workshops in order to interview or informing both the general audience, but also climate activists on scientific viewpoints on the climate crisis. So this is the case also for the Museum of Nature History in Berlin, and they are collaborating intensely with the Fridays for Future movement in Berlin. In the third category, you will find workshops or conferences focusing on climate emergency, on sustainability and self-empowerment, but those are not supposed to be for the general audience, but much more for professionals, like GLAM professionals, like we are working in the different GLAM institutions. So this is more debating on what can we do both actually to face the impact of climate change onto our cultural heritage, but also how shall we act as institution towards that political issue, climate emergency, and how can we become more informed on sustainability aspects. So here is one huge conference that was held by the Smithsonian American Institute and the ICOMOS, which is the Heritage Working Group of the International Council of Monuments and Sites. And it was aimed for GLAM professionals. It was held in the States in the beginning of March. And it was giving you a broad overview on global strategies for sustaining cultural heritage through climate change. So it was focusing very much on the impact climate change will have on our cultural heritage. Please follow the link for the very interesting video documentation. Preparing the next climate change conference in Glasgow for next year. There has been an online workshop at the New Yorker Climate Museum, which is a fairly new institution in the States, gathering GLAM professionals in order to find out how the role of the museum as an institution could change towards, or should change towards, the climate issue, and what they could actually do. And very similar, there was a more general call for paper for this climate conference in Glasgow next year, where you could reach in different submissions on both workshops and talks and publications, activities you were running. This call has ended by now, but please find more information on the outcome of the call for paper. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting to learn more about it. Then, of course, associations, like in this case, it is the US Western Museums Association. They are blogging on effects of climate change and the political role of museums towards that. From my point of view, in Europe, these political issues are not so much addressed yet. It's more focusing on the actual impact of climate change and not so much on how we as GLAM institutions could politically act towards climate crisis. In the fourth category, I named changing. This is referring to how actually institutions are changing their house policies. Could be towards more sustainability as a general rule, but could also be focusing on climate crisis, like institutions banning inland flights from their possibility for business trips, or performing green events, as Europeana did last year in Lisbon. Or other institutions are awarding a more sustainable activities in their institutions and beyond. So let's see what kind of ideas we find over here. First of all, working for the German National Library, I would like to focus on the not so well-known Green Library Award of the International Library Association, IFLA. It has been going on now for several years already. And the call for paper for next year, or candidates, just ended like 2 weeks ago. And its objectives is to show libraries that are committed to environmental sustainability. They're producing projects that create awareness in libraries. And the whole award is promoting the development of green libraries initiatives locally and worldwide. For now, there have been mainly smaller libraries been awarded. And I think there has only been one in Europe, and the other ones were in Africa and in Asia. So this is a thing you might consider if you are a library to go for that award. Then other institutions are putting up toolkits, what you could actually do, as we're doing here as well. So there's the Climate Action Toolkit from Scotland that is collecting quite a few pragmatical tips on what you could do as institutions in order to take action, and sharing that with the world. I think this is very helpful. It starts with how you can split your garbage using LED instead of normal bulbs, going through what kind of energy you use, producing green events, very many practical ideas how you as institution could change your carbon footprint. And then, of course, there are best practices. There are combining both the idea of informing others on climate change and doing this in an artistic way. Then they also try to alternate the individual attitudes towards climate change by offering a workshop program, and they themselves are performing a green event. So being aware of all the sustainability issues while doing the exhibition. And a good example for a combination of these different examples, or these different, attitudes towards the problem was the exhibition Down to Earth. And as it took place here in Berlin in summer 2020. And it gave you both a global overview on artistic answers to climate change and climate crisis. It also offered you a large range of workshops where you could place yourself within, like, what is your position within carbon footprint, within sustainability and so. And it also really tried hard to reduce its own carbon footprint, making, like, inviting artists to come virtually to the exhibition instead of having them travel through the world. Of course, this effect was a little bit countered by Corona. Because of Corona, they could not travel anyway. But I think it's a very interesting, holistic viewpoint of the topic. And there is the Tate Modern to be mentioned here, that is changing its climate policies. They do that both in when they are building their new offices or their new exhibitions hall, which will be completely following up the sustainability audit. But they are also setting new standards for museums and galleries all over the UK by doing so, as they are reporting a lot of it and trying to reduce their carbon footprint through this new building. In the fifth category, we've come to acting. So this means that you as an institution are raising your voice in climate crisis. You are taking political action towards climate emergency, and you are helping or being part of the climate action movement. So here we find the most easiest way to raise your voice and to produce some impact in the debate as institution is, of course, being part of social media campaigns. There has been different hashtags on Twitter, for instance, where museums all over the world have been participating and catching up and showing, shining their light on climate change and climate crisis. Of course, this hashtag collection is incomplete, and I know that there has been quite some activities in Instagram as well. I really invite you all here to extend that collection of best practices. Then there's, of course, the possibility of writing open letters to the responsible minister. In this case, it has been 25 museums and galleries in Germany that wrote an open letter to our arts and culture minister in November 2019, asking for help both in by know-how and also in providing like better audits, more personnel, more money as well, to help museums to become greener institutions. Because setting up, for instance, a more sustainable heating system or air conditioning is quite a complex issue that normally you can't cope with that being just a normal museum. There has been an update on that letter as it was written in November 2019, and I linked both of them here in the slides. Actually, the minister has not yet responded on it due to Corona, it is said. Then I would like to mention the activities of the Natural History Museum of London. That has become the very first museum, I think, in the world that declared climate emergency. You have heard probably from many cities around the world that have claimed climate emergency, which means that they, in all their political activities, are fighting climate emergency. It has become like a major focus topic for them. And here the Natural History Museum in London has also claimed climate emergency, which means that they are focusing all their activities, no matter if they're exhibitions, no matter if they rebuild parts of their housing, or now, for instance, the museum gardens are altered. They just receive fundings in order to transform it into a more, let's say, wild and fostering biodiversity than it has been before. And of course, reducing their carbon footprint as an institution. And being quite a big institution, of course, this makes an impact. But I see what I consider to be even more important is that they openly and engaged talk about it, what they are doing. It's not just changing your policies, you need to talk about it so others take up the example and follow you. And I think they're doing a very good job there. So we are in the Europeana Network Association. We're about 3,000 people working in institutions all over Europe. And I think we all can contribute. We can stop just doing blah, blah, as the youngsters say. We can start to do action and talk about it. Let's collect our activities. They will inspire us and they will empower us to become better climate activists throughout the time. And so I have started like following the example of Douglas and Andrea on Open GLAM institutions. I started a simple little spreadsheet in a Google Docs where we can collect as our best practices examples and naming the GLAM institution and what kind of association it is, giving it a category, saying what country or town you find it, maybe giving it some keywords and a short description, and of course, link it to where you find more information. So this spreadsheet, you will find the link to the spreadsheet in the slides, and I really invite you to join us collecting those best practices. So I will share the link to this spreadsheet, this Google spreadsheet, in the slides, so we can all make make that collection a rich resource for us on best practices in climate action in the GLAM field. Last but not least, I would like to give you some hints where you could find more folks like you are, like where do you find companions in order to become a climate activist. There's the CO2 campaign, Count Us In, that is fostered by the UN Museum. There is the We Are Museums community. There is the Climate Museum in New York that is looking for people to support them, both as interns, but also in their community. There's the Museum for Future Team and the Library for Future Team, both groups active in social media. There's the IFLA Climate Change Working Group. You need to be an IFLA member in order to become part of it. And likewise for the ICAM Sustainable Working Group. And of course, there's the INA Climate Group, both we founded last year in Madrid, and we really like to welcome you there. Of course, this list is, there's no ranking intended, and it is, of course, incomplete. So please fill it with your own knowledge. Yeah, if you would like to have reach out and get in touch, you can do that directly contacting me. I've linked my contact data here, or you can contact me through the chat channel of the conference. Thank you.